Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? One thing we do know is that the scouting combine in Indianapolis is getting ready to push off from the dock. And free agency begins shortly thereafter, next month. And then it'll be the draft. As NFL's offseason is getting into full swing, Saints have begun the process of getting within cap compliance. And, of course, as we move into spring, it means mock draft season. And Mel Kiper has done and released his latest mock draft, now with the Senior Bowl and things like that in the rearview mirror and ahead of the combine. And I want to be clear because so many people put out mock drafts. It's fine. I don't mind mock drafts at all. But I wanted to share with you my approach to a mock draft, why I look at it. Typically, if you're Mel Kiper, if you're Todd McShay, if you're somebody who is a draft analyst for a major network, you typically are deeply connected. Not only are you a scout, but you're also deeply connected with each of the organizations, so you have a sense of what those organizations are thinking. It's not necessarily to say that you've looked at their draft board, but you have a sense of what their needs are and what direction they might be going. Similarly, you also have a sense of how teams feel about certain players, so you know where they're projected to go. Maybe not necessarily that exact spot, but around where about in the draft. So that's why I like to look at mock drafts. Not necessarily to say definitively that this person was mocked to this team, so that's going to be the pick. It's more around about need and where guys are projected to go, if that makes sense. So Mel Kiper's latest mock draft, for example, has Derek Stingley falling to the 12th pick. And I say falling just because he has throughout the process been projected much higher than that. But when Mel Kiper has Derek Stingley at 8, and you start to see a lot of other mock drafts that similarly have Derek Stingley outside of the top 5 or the top 10, it tells you pretty definitively that there's a consensus among people in NFL circles that there's questions about Derek Stingley that have caused him to move outside of the top 10. He was almost unanimously selection for the Jets at 4 for many, many months. Well, he has the Liz Frank injury, now he has surgery, and he missed the bulk of this season. And so there's these questions. So you start to see Stingley drop a little bit in these mock drafts. But what Mel Kiper did today is something that I thought was very interesting. In his mock draft, they are now allowed to project trades in these ESPN mock drafts. That's exactly what Mel Kiper did. And I was asked earlier today if I thought the Saints might trade, what the odds are that the Saints would make a trade in this draft. And I said 100%. Because they always do. I don't know if it'll be in the first round. But at some point in this draft, like in every draft, the Saints, who are notoriously aggressive, that's how they approach the draft. They're not patient. There are teams like New England, like Baltimore, that like to accumulate picks, that like to move back, they like to accumulate assets to then let the draft come to them. They have more assets with which they can play. That's one way to approach it. Another is New Orleans, which says we can draft 10 guys, but 10 guys aren't going to make the roster, so let's just get aggressive, use the assets we have. It's a quality over quantity type play, which is fantastic. And sometimes you hit on both, like the Saints in 2017, where they used all their picks and got and hit on every one of them. A draft that landed you Marshawn Lattimore and Ryan Ramczyk and Trey Hendrickson. I mean, it's incredible, right? So, yes, I think the Saints at some point will trade up. And if they do this, what Mel Kiper proposes, I'd be pretty excited about it. So Mel Kiper, in his mock draft, proposes that the Saints move up from 18 to 14 in a deal with the Baltimore Ravens. Again, remember, the Ravens are a team that I said notoriously likes to trade back. They like to accumulate picks and assets and move back. The Saints are an aggressive team. Now, the Saints have moved up in round 1 before. We've seen that. They did just a couple of years ago for Marcus Davenport. But to move up as far as they did in round 1, they had to give up another 1. They gave up the next year's first-round pick. That's when they started the draft with a 2, and they took Eric McCoy in 2019. But if you're just moving from 18 to 14, it's not going to be as costly. The compensation that Mel Kiper points out is a third-round pick. And remember, the Saints have a compensatory third-round pick this year. So they're basically trading their compensatory pick to move up 4 spots from 18 to 14 to make sure they get the player that they want. And the player that they want, according to Mel Kiper, is wide receiver Garrett Wilson from Ohio State. This would be a sensational circumstance if it played out this way. I don't know if Garrett Wilson would still be on the board at 14. Are there teams that potentially could have him graded higher so that if they're sitting there and he's sitting there at 14 or even closer or higher, might they take a best available instead of the position of need sort of thing? One thing is for certain, and we all know this, the Saints' biggest need is receiver. It's not even the question. They're going to address, we think, quarterback in free agency. Be it signing Jameis Winston, making a trade for a starting player. I think that's the most likely scenario. Maybe they don't, and they go into this draft looking to draft a quarterback in round 1. I don't think that's what they're going to do, but they might. But if they're able to re-sign Jameis or make a trade for Russell Wilson, you get Michael Thomas healthy, and then you supplement that position with a first-round draft pick at receiver, now all of a sudden you're dangerous offensively again. And the thing that I like most about the possibility of a Garrett Wilson is that he has a contrasting style. His style is in contrast to Michael Thomas. Thomas is the big-bodied receiver that you could put in the slot that within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage, anything you throw in a certain radius, he's going to haul in. Garrett Wilson is a big play threat. This last year at Ohio State, Garrett Wilson averaged 15.5 yards per reception. For comparison, Justin Jefferson, his final year at LSU, averaged 14.6 yards. Forgive me, that was his career average. Actually, in 2019, it was 13 yards. But in his career at LSU, Justin Jefferson averaged 14.6 yards per reception. Safe to say he's a big play threat. And Garrett Wilson, his yards per completion is higher than Justin Jefferson's at LSU. Definitely higher than Jordan Jefferson's at LSU. Jamar Chase, if you're wondering, averaged 21 yards a catch. He was a total freak show, let's be honest. He's projected, Wilson is, to run a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. If you're talking about a guy that averages more than 15 yards a catch and runs a 4.4, you're talking about the game breaker that can go over the top. You're talking about the guy that the Saints don't presently have in this offense. If you could pair Wilson and Thomas, both Buckeyes, by the way, that would be a dream scenario for any coach calling plays and for any quarterback throwing to these guys. And then on top of that, you would add Marquez Callaway as your 3, Deontay Harris as your 4. You see what I'm getting at? Now, all of a sudden, you're talented and you're deep at that position. We haven't mentioned Traquan Smith, but you know how I feel about him. I like that. I like that a lot. So, if in fact you can go up to 14 and get Garrett Wilson, the best receiver in this draft, I'm perfectly fine with doing it. The other possibility as well, if you look at the way that Kiper sort of spells out this draft, you got Treylon Burks, the wide receiver out of Arkansas, going 19. Now, Treylon Burks more resembles Michael Thomas. But Chris Olave from Ohio State at 23, Jahan Dotson from Penn State at 26, Jamison Williams may end up being the steal of the draft. Jamison Williams was very likely going to be the first or second receiver taken in this draft. Tore his ACL in the national championship game. Kiper is mocking him 28 to Green Bay. If that's a guy that's potentially on the board where you can get great value provided he's healthy, I'd love that as well. I think the one thing that's a consensus here we all agree on is that the Saints are going to look wide receiver high in this draft, not in the first, very likely in the first round. And there's going to be a lot of options on the board. And apparently, even the best receiver in the draft is going to be within the Saints' reach. Jamar Chase wouldn't have been, right? Jamar Chase, when you're talking about a top 5 pick, the Saints aren't moving from 18 to 5. In this draft in particular, where you have a dearth of quarterbacks, a lot of offensive and defensive linemen, could the best receiver in the draft slide into the teens, and it's manageable for the Saints to move from 18 to 14 to snag that player. Maybe so, and I'd be for it if they could. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.